This is why it's better to have one friend that you hang out with regularly instead of having a big group of friends. And trust me, you're going to want to listen to this story time. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I was kind of going through an identity crisis, and low-key still am. I went to a predominantly white school for the majority of my life. So let's just say I was extremely whitewashed. It was one of those times in my life where if a white person said the N-word around me, I would just laugh. Not because I didn't know it was wrong, but because I wanted to be accepted and I wanted to be like everybody else, and I seeked validation. Sophomore year was really when I started to become who I am today. I wanted to learn way more about my culture and my background. So I started becoming friends with people from other schools that are more diverse. Eventually, I met this group of girls. And I thought these girls were going to be the sweetest girls I would ever meet. Now, this friend group was serving flavor. I'm talking diverse to the T. One night, we decided that we were going to spend the night at one of the girls' houses. Let's call this girl Sally. I kept getting lost on the way to Sally's house, and I thought it was because I didn't know the area that well. Keep in mind, that's what I thought was the reason. I get there and we watch like 4 or 5 movies before I end up falling asleep. And when I wake up, I was in a room full of grown-ass men staring at me. Storytime part 2 of why it's better to have one loyal friend instead of a big group of friends. I forgot to mention in part 1 that when I arrived, the men were already there. Mind you, we were in sophomore year. These men looked like they were in college. So I was already a little thrown off, but I trusted it because I was with my friend. When I wake up, these men are like staring at me. But they try to look away really fast, but I could tell that they were staring at me. I start thinking the worst of the worst. I try to think of any possible way that I could get out of there, whether it was physically or mentally. So I pretend to fall asleep just to escape the reality of it. But then one of the men at the bottom of the bed starts rubbing my feet. I immediately kick my leg so I can get his hands off. Now I'm thinking he's gonna be mad and I'm gonna get fucking attacked. So I try to make small talk to loosen the tension. So I look at the guys and I'm like, hey, do you know where the girls went? One of them looks at me and says, oh, they went home. So I'm like, I thought this was Sally's house. And they say nothing. So at this point, I think I'm being set up. I try my best to not make it seem like I'm suspicious of them. I casually act like I need to pee. Walk into the bathroom and I see a window. Automatically something clicks in my mind, get the fuck out of there. Making part 3 right now. Part 3 of why you should have one loyal friend instead of hanging out with a big group of friends. So I go into the bathroom and there's a window. I'm thinking to myself, I would be so dumb. I would be so extremely incredibly stupid to go back into that room full of grown-ass men that I've never met before, instead of making my escape through that window right here, right now. So I trusted my gut and I got the fuck out of there. Mind you, I'm in my PJs right now. No shoes, no socks. I'm making my great escape. Call me Pablo Escobar. While I was doing all of it, I was in disbelief. Like, I cannot believe that I'm escaping like right now. Like, this is actually insane. I did what I believed was right at the moment. And honestly, that decision might be the reason why I'm alive right now. So I make a run for it. I immediately run to the front of the neighborhood. I hide behind some trees and then I call my sister. I call my sister instead of my parents because my mom was the one who drove me there. And if she knew that something bad happened, she wouldn't have let me go out again. I'm frantically explaining everything on the phone to my sister. She literally speeds to come get me. When she gets there, I immediately hop in her car and we get the fuck out of there. On our way home, I get a text from Sally. Last part is part 4. I'm making that right now. Part 4 of why you should have one loyal friend instead of having a big group of friends. So I'm on my way home and I get a text from Sally. Hey girl, where are you? We went to the gas station to get some milkshakes. You could have came with, but you were already asleep. I didn't even respond. I just blocked all of them because I know damn well that they were not getting milkshakes. Because one, why didn't they wake me up to get milkshakes? Because I wasn't the first person to fall asleep. I'd never fall asleep first at somebody's house with a big group of people. I saw somebody else who looked like they were sleeping, so I thought that I was going to fall asleep too. Two, why were all those grown-ass men there? Nobody told me that they were going to be there. Like I said, we were sophomores. These men were in college. Maybe even graduated from college. They were grown. 3, why would she lie about it being her house? 4, why did the boy say she went home? I remember when I said I kept getting lost because I didn't know the area. Once I went back to look through the messages that I had with those girls to see if there was anything fishy going on, I noticed that they were all sending me different addresses. Either one number would be off or a letter would be off. They definitely were planning something because they were trying to get me there late. I haven't seen or talked to those girls since then.
This is why you should always trust your gut. In the 1970s, a young couple decided to go for a late-night hike in the woods. A couple minutes into their walk, and the man remembers thinking something's not right. He tells his girlfriend, but they just decide to ignore it and keep going, until he steps on something that felt really soft, like it was alive. Before he has a chance to see what he stepped on, they hear all this rustling in the bushes next to them, and they bolt. Years later, that couple turns on the TV, and a death row inmate who's about to be executed is being interviewed. And they ask him, was there ever a time that you were almost caught red-handed? He responded, yes, one time. I was in the woods, and a couple walked through, and the man actually stepped on the body of a girl I had just killed. I was hiding in the bushes just a few feet away. They didn't see me. That couple had run into one of the worst serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy.
Extremely toxic best friend story time. So when I was in 8th grade, there was this boy. And this boy would go around telling almost every girl that he liked her. And I was one of those girls. And he would do stuff with all of us. And there were like 11 of us. So we all hated each other. Especially this one girl, and we're gonna call her Abby. And every time we saw each other, we would be super mean to each other. Well, a year passed, we stopped talking to this kid. And I bumped into her at homecoming and basically apologized. So after that, we became best friends. And everything was good until every time I told her about a guy, she would start talking to them. Like this one boy that I was Snapchatting and talking to, she accidentally sent nudes to him and said, "Oh, sorry, I meant to send them to my boyfriend." So then she called one of my other best friends and said, "No, it actually wasn't an accident." And of course he told me because he was my best friend. So I was like, whatever, and stopped talking to the boy. And she did it again, like for part 2. Extremely toxic best friend part 2. So pretty much her excuse for that was, oh, well, he said that he was gonna leak my nudes if I didn't send him them again. Which was a lie because literally half the school already had her nudes. So then I started talking to this other boy. And he lived like right down the street from her. So she was like, if you want to go to his house, you can. And I was like, are you sure? And she said, yeah, just go tell my mom. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went and told her mom where I was going and went over his house. So I walked back to her house and she literally locked me out. Like her mom had to come open the door for me to let me in. And she was like, oh, it's a good thing you came back when you did. Because I was going to drive you home now and tell your dad everything that you did. And she goes, I don't think you guys should be together because you're unexperienced. And she would always tell me how he flirts with her all the time. So after our friendship ended, she goes, I just felt like it was always a competition between me and you.
But one day in elementary school, it was lunchtime. A bitch had to go potty. It was poo-poo time. So I remember I went to the restroom and I was exploding or whatever. And these girls walked in. We're gonna call them the Chipettes, okay? This is the best part. So the Chipettes start yelling in the bathroom. Is someone here? Can someone hear me? Like, I didn't say anything. I was literally taking a shit. Like, what? These girls, deadass, start laughing. They turn off the lights in the bathroom. They turn on all the sinks, whatever. And they start saying, like, Bloody Mary or some shit. And then the Chipettes run out of the bathroom and shut the door. So here I am, getting casted on. I remember seeing a shadow. I fell on my ass. And I start screaming and crying. It wasn't good. So someone called the janitor. Janitor walks in to check up on me. It's a guy.
Story time of how I caught my teacher and my best friend doing the dirty. So everything was fine up until the middle of the year when she started acting really strange, and so did he. So at the time, I was 13 and she was 14. And I'm pretty sure my teacher was in his mid-20s or 30s. So basically, she's the type of girl who literally hates school and would do anything to get out of class. Then I noticed her getting early to class and not leaving until everybody else left. Then I started paying a little more attention, and he would always walk by her desk and slip her notes and candy and just weird stuff, and it was really, really strange to me. He also moved to her desk right next to his, which his was all the way in the back left corner of the classroom. He would also always make jokes with her, which I didn't really understand until I found out they were sleeping together. So on Friday, my mom messaged her parents asking if they could pick me up Monday because my parents were going out of town that weekend and I hated riding the bus. Well, I'm guessing she didn't know that I was going home with her Monday. So that Monday, I got into her mom's car and I asked her mom where she was. Her mom said that she was failing math and her math teacher offered to tutor her. This teacher was also brand new. I'm running out of time, so for part 2. Here's part 2 of how I found out my best friend was sleeping with our teacher. So continuing on with the story, I told her mom that I've never seen him tutor somebody before. Plus, she told me her grades were sky high in that class. I ended up forgetting my pencil pouch, which had my keys to my house in it, so I had to go back anyways. And when I went back, the door was locked. And like he had something over it or whatever, but I could see under it because he didn't cover it all the way. And she was on his desk and he was kissing her or doing weird stuff. I knew her mom wouldn't believe me if I told her what I saw, so I just told her it was an emergency and she was in trouble. So we booked it back to the classroom. And at first we didn't see them, and then she seen a foot come from beside the desk. Mind you, we're peeking under it, so we couldn't really see much. She started banging on the classroom door and screaming. I've never seen her this mad. I was honestly terrified that I ran into a separate classroom. The teacher to this day, I'm pretty sure he's still in jail, and she is still homeschooled and grounded with no phone. We found out that he was married with 4 kids. Well, was married.
Be careful what you put in your body. In 2014, a couple returned to their home to find it trashed in baffling ways. There was lotion all over the door handles, all of their shoes had had their soles ripped off of them, and someone had dumped an entire can of paint all over the toilet. Despite the obvious break-in, the police come and can't find any evidence of theft, so they leave thinking the couple's not in danger anymore. That night, the couple hears scratching underneath their bed and what sounds like a crying animal. Not wanting to find out what it was, they leave and call the cops, who come right back and start investigating the house, and they make a startling discovery in their bedroom. Wedged underneath the couple's bed was this 90-pound tiny little woman carrying a huge butcher's knife and a hypodermic needle. As they're taking this crazy lady away in handcuffs, one of the officers comes over to the couple and is like, so she was high on meth, and for at least 2 hours, she had been burrowing a hole in the underside of your mattress with that knife to get to you.
Storytime about how I found out that my boyfriend was trying to get with another girl on Valentine's Day. Okay, there's a lot that goes into this story time, so let me break it down for you real quick. I was a sophomore and my boyfriend and I had been dating for about 4 months now. And he was a junior. Well, there was this girl that he was for some reason obsessed with in his Spanish class. She was a freshman, and I know you're probably thinking, oh, well, how did you know he was obsessed with her? Well, he would Snapchat this girl 24/7. Even his friends told me he was obsessed with her. So I talked to him and I told him I was uncomfortable with how much he was talking to this girl. And he said, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'll block her. Now, I didn't ask him to do that, but it made me feel more confident in how he felt about me. Well, Valentine's Day comes around, and we didn't talk all day until he came to pick me up. I wished him a happy Valentine's Day and got left undelivered. So we get to the restaurants and we decide to put our phones at the end of the table so that way we would be more focused on each other. Well, he goes to the bathroom and then I see this name pop up on his phone. Like for part 2. Part 2. So, like I said, I saw this name on his phone, and there was something special about this name. So, whenever I kept streaks, I would put the word streak, and then an emoji, and then the person's name. And he got the idea that instead of keeping her name, he would put it as streak. So I was like, that's really fucking weird. And at first I was like, what the fuck? So I opened his phone, and what do you know? It's from that girl. And she was replying back to a big paragraph that he sent her. And we had school that same day. So at 6:30 in the morning, this girl got a big paragraph from my boyfriend about how she's such a beautiful, amazing girl, and that she deserves somebody who's gonna take her out and buy her flowers and stuff. And how if she wanted to go out to dinner, let him know. He took an extremely long time in the bathroom, so the waiter came to our table. So I ordered $300 worth of food for myself. So when he came back, I told him that I had to go call my mom, and I left. And he was stuck with a $400 bill.
Story time, how I catfished the girl that my brother-in-law was cheating with. So my brother-in-law always had a bit of a cheating reputation, and he definitely gave me the worst vibe. He had even cheated on my sister before, but they forgave each other and worked things out. Whatever. But I knew that something was up once rumors started to fly again. And so did my sister. And there was one particular girl on his phone that was very sus. So my sister got the number and we decided to set her up. We didn't really know how much she knew or if she was aware that he was married. So we just pretended to be him and asked her to come over. And since they had been hooking up, she was down to come over. So we sat and waited, and she walked in expecting to see my brother-in-law, but instead she got my sister and I. When I say she was shocked, I mean she was shocked. She wasn't furious or anything, however, she kept acting weird like it was all a big joke. She was like, oh my god, I had no idea he was married, which you can't blame her for everything, it takes two to tango. However, I still think you should be aware of who you're seeing. But she agreed to confront him with us. Follow me on Instagram and stay tuned for part 2. Part 2 on how I catfished the girl that my brother-in-law was cheating with. So he was still at the house, just hanging out upstairs, had no idea what was going on downstairs when we invited over the girl. And once she agreed to confront him, we decided to walk on upstairs. So she walked up and literally called this man by his first name. And he denied knowing her. Like, we were in shock. Like, we caught you. Like, here she is. How are you even going to deny that you know her when she's calling you by your first name? But she just kept laughing and he just kept denying it. It was extremely uncomfortable and super weird. She literally knew everything about him and even walked over and tried to be like all cutesy with him. And still, he denied. So we just ended up making her leave, and I literally fought this man. My sister was upset and shocked, but I was way more furious than she was. It's one thing for people to hurt you, but not the people that you love. Luckily, she is done and no longer with him. At the end of the day, we need to know our self-worth and set high standards for the people that we're dating. Follow the girl that sent me this story and add me on Instagram and DM me if you have a story of your own.
So there's this lighthouse that you can see from my house, and my mom used to tell me a story about a woman who used to live there. No one lives in it now, but there used to be this young woman in her 20s who lived there like 30 years ago. Apparently she came from a really broken home. Her mom and sister died in a horrible car crash, and her dad was an abusive drug addict. So the harbor master let her live in the lighthouse and paid her a small salary for taking care of it. So she had been living there for a couple months, and that's when she noticed weird things starting to happen. Some of her belongings would occasionally go missing. Like one time she couldn't find her flashlight and she looked for it everywhere. And finally she found it under her bed, which was weird because she knew she had never put it there. But then weirder stuff started to happen. So at this point, she had been living at the lighthouse for like 6 months, and she was getting pretty creeped out because bizarre things started happening. She started noticing that some of her food was going missing, but she was the only person who lived in the lighthouse, obviously, and she was really specific about what food she bought when she went grocery shopping. She went to the grocery store at the beginning of each week, and for example, she would always buy 7 apples, one for each day of the week, and she was always really precise about that. But there were a few Sundays where she didn't have any apples left by the end of the week, which didn't make any sense because she always counted at the grocery store to make sure she had 7 apples, so she started getting more and more creeped out, but she didn't want to say anything because she had nowhere else to live. And then one night, she woke up in the middle of the night to something touching her feet at the end of her bed. So she woke up in the middle of the night to something tickling her feet, and she was really freaked out, obviously. So she jumped out of bed and turned all the lights in the lighthouse on. But when the lights came on, there was nothing there. She checked through the whole lighthouse and couldn't find anything. Nothing like that ever happened again, but she never slept well after that. She stayed in the lighthouse for like 5 more months, but eventually she found a new place to live, got a new job. She ended up moving to an entirely different state. And then one day, like a year later, she's at work, sitting at her desk, and she's going through old pictures on her phone. And she finds an album on her phone called You at Night. And she's thinking, what? I do not remember making this album. So she clicks into it and she gasps because all the pictures in the album are of her sleeping in her old bed at the lighthouse.